Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to The Plain Bagel. I'm your host, Richard Coffin. While I haven't been really covering the events on this channel, you've obviously probably seen the headlines about FTX and the trial of Sam Bankman-Fried, or SBF, the cryptocurrency exchange founder known by this acronym online, who was found guilty of violating federal laws. But today's video is not about Sam Bankman-Fried. Instead, it is about Chanpeng Zhao, or CZ, a cryptocurrency exchange founder known by this acronym online, who was found guilty of violating federal laws. Wait a minute. But yes, you've probably seen the headlines that not even 3 weeks after SBF's own guilty verdict, we now have the other big player, the biggest cryptocurrency exchange in the world, Binance, and its founder CZ, being charged by the Department of Justice. With, in this case, CZ actually reaching a plea deal and pleading guilty, which has some real poetic irony to it when you consider that by many accounts, CZ sort of kicked off the collapse of FTX. Now, to be fair, FTX was misusing client funds, so it was really only a matter of time before people realized that the company was missing $8 billion of their clients' money. But nonetheless, this tweet by CZ where he announced that Binance was pulling support for FTX and selling off FTT, which was the company's native cryptocurrency, did sort of kick things off. Now he's being charged, which is a really big bummer when you consider that his pinned tweet on X includes compliance and ignoring FUD as his sort of New Year's resolutions for 2023. So I guess that's not going so well. Now, to be clear, the charges laid against Binance and CZ are very different from what SBF faced. With FTX, you basically had client funds being misused and lost by the company. In this case, that hasn't happened. And there are a number of other key differences with the charges even. As mentioned, CZ is looking to settle the charges with a plea deal that includes stepping down as Binance's CEO, paying $50 million in fines, and Binance itself paying a $4.3 billion fine, which is the largest ever in cryptocurrency history, with the biggest difference being that Binance is allowed to continue operating, and some are speculating that given the plea deal, CZ might not actually see any jail time, or if he does, it'll be a very short term, compared to SBF, where it's not looking so good. So this isn't the end of Binance's troubles, because there are actually still some outstanding accusations against the company and CZ. So in today's video, I'll talk about what charges we have seen so far in the settlement, the plea deal around that, what it means for Binance and the cryptocurrency space as a whole, and what it all leaves outstanding. But before we hop into all that, let's give a quick overview of what Binance is for all those unfamiliar, and then hop right into the charges being laid here. Founded in 2017, Binance, as mentioned, is the world's largest cryptocurrency exchange, with 40% of the world's trading volume going through their platform. And to achieve this, they've naturally been a very aggressive grower. Cryptocurrency exchanges already operate in a pretty opaque gray area when it comes to registration and regulatory requirements, given that the laws haven't yet been written about how they should be registered. But Binance would often offer their services to countries before meeting any sort of regulatory requirements or being properly registered. This included in the US, where in 2019, the company had to effectively split its service between Binance.com, the international arm, and Binance.us, which was registered in the US as a money transmitter and had a limited list of cryptocurrencies that could be traded, but that met the US regulations that currently existed. Lately, however, there's been some overhang given some ongoing investigations. And after 3 years of investigating themselves, the Department of Justice has laid out some charges against Binance and, by extension, CZ, with the lawsuit highlighting 3 different counts. The first count has to do with failing to maintain an effective anti-money laundering program. Money laundering, if you aren't familiar, does actually refer to the idea of laundering or cleaning money. It's the act of concealing the origin of illegally obtained funds. Because illegally obtained funds could be confiscated by authorities and could link criminals back to the crime, there's obviously an interest in cleaning funds. And Binance isn't accused of laundering funds themselves, but rather just letting it happen on their platform. Typically, financial institutions are required to make reasonable efforts to ascertain the source and purpose of funds that they're managing for clients, with this generally being labeled as anti-money laundering, the idea that you're trying to combat money laundering by getting more information about money that you're handling. That's where the idea of know your client comes from, the idea that you need to understand who your client is, where they get their money, so on and so forth, and also where there are requirements for reporting suspicious transactions. If your local business owner client suddenly asks you to transfer $50,000 to an account located in the United Arab Emirates, it should naturally raise some red flags, and you should report that as a suspicious transaction. Now, there are a lot of AML requirements for traditional companies operating in the finance space. I just myself finished my annual AML training on the subject. So you would think for a company operating in the cryptocurrency space, which has a reputation for facilitating shady deals and black market arrangements, you'd think that there would be some extra effort to make sure that things were going by the book, given that you already are dealing in a pretty dangerous space. But the DOJ alleges that not only did Binance lack proper procedure for monitoring, flagging, and reporting suspicious transactions, but that they actually knowingly allowed suspicious transactions on their platform. In one example, they highlight an employee discussing a user that was known for dealing in illicit funds. In fact, they were publicly identified for being a top contributor of illicit funds. The employee discusses wanting to let this client know to be careful with the funds that they get from the darknet and to make a new account because their old account had been associated with this activity. There's even a quote from a compliance employee in the suit that goes, "We need a banner. Is washing drug money too hard these days? Come to Binance. We got cake for you." Which makes the Binance compliance department 0-2 for ridiculous quotes that come back to bite them in the butt. So that's the first count. Not only did the company significantly lack proper AML procedures, they just directly kind of circumvented them in many cases. The second count is conducting an unlicensed money transmitting business. In the US, being registered as a money transmitter is one of the bare minimum requirements for anyone who, again, is handling money, because then it bestows upon you the requirement to have those AML procedures and things of that sort. And again, because there's no real laws or regulation around how cryptocurrency exchanges should be registered, the money transmitter registration is actually the de facto registration for pretty much every cryptocurrency broker or exchange. Now again, Binance US was properly registered in the United States as a money transmitter. And on paper, Binance users wouldn't be able to use Binance.com, but would have to actually use Binance.us, the more limited version that was, again, by the books. But according to the case, CZ very much encouraged US-based VIP users, which are just large clients, to stay on the international site, which was not registered. With the case alleging that employees basically were instructed to help VIP users hide their US location to, again, circumvent that requirement. Finally, the third count, which simply reads International Emergency Economic Powers Act, has to do with the company violating US sanctions on other countries, namely in this case against Iran, with Binance being accused of causing at least $890 million in transactions between US users and users Binance identified as Iranians, with the Department of Justice also alleging that Binance facilitated transactions to Cuba, Syria, illegally occupied regions of Ukraine, and a later Treasury Department release highlighting facilitated transactions for North Korea and terrorist groups like Hamas, ISIS, and Al-Qaeda. Basically everybody. For all the things you can say about Binance, you can't say that they weren't welcoming. So obviously some pretty nasty charges against CZ and Binance as a whole. But given CZ's reputation as being really true to the nature of cryptocurrency, often being reluctant to work with regulators and seemingly trying to keep Binance outside of the current traditional finance system, it's perhaps not all that surprising that his company wasn't following all the regulations. So you would think with all this blatant disregard for the regulations aimed at preventing terrorist financing and other criminal activities, they would really see the hammer come down on CZ and Binance to show that if you make it to the top by cheating, eventually it will catch up to you, right? Well, not really. True, the fine is the largest we've seen in the space so far, and is actually on par with what the Sackler family is trying to settle for regarding their role in perpetuating the opioid epidemic in the US with their OxyContin product. But as mentioned, Binance gets to remain in operation. CZ is actually only barred from working at the company for 3 years, and remains a majority shareholder in the company, which is why while we've seen a small plummet in BNB, which is the native cryptocurrency for Binance, we haven't seen the type of crash that FTT went through. And as mentioned, it doesn't look like CZ will spend much, if any, time in jail. There's actually another recent AML-related plea deal for BitMEX, where the former CEO, Arthur Hayes, was only sentenced to 2 years probation. Not to mention, this case also settles some other charges brought against the company by the Treasury Department and the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, who were more or less alleging the same thing, that the company was not properly registered. So while you would expect some lesser consequences than what SBF is facing, given that clients in this case haven't lost their money, it is still strange to see that this company that actively facilitated illegal activity on its platform, stuff that's likely directly tied to terrorist activity, the sort of stuff these laws are specifically designed to prevent, it's weird to see that this company is going to continue as the world's largest cryptocurrency exchange and that CZ is going to remain a billionaire after all this. Now, since the announcement of the charges and the plea deal, CZ has actually tweeted about all this, confirming that he was stepping down as the company's CEO and being replaced by Richard Tang, the former global head of regional markets. And he also highlighted that he'd take the opportunity to relax, while emphasizing that the suit does not allege Binance misappropriated user funds and does not allege Binance engaged in any market manipulation. Funds are seifu, which really sounds like someone who regrets helping to finance terrorism and crime. Neat. So that settles the Department of Justice probe. We'll still have to wait for the official sentencing in February. Both the defense and the prosecution on board here. It's unlikely the sentencing will really add anything substantial to what we've already seen. However, one thing that remains outstanding that isn't settled by all this is that SEC lawsuit from June this year, which we actually touched on this channel, was brought forward by the Securities Exchange Commission, accusing Binance of not only not properly being registered, offering unregistered securities, but also accuses Binance of commingling customer funds with separate trading companies owned by CZ. Wait a minute. Now here, there is still that high-level question about jurisdiction, about whether cryptocurrencies count as securities, an issue that we touched on with that earlier video. But nonetheless, we still have some pretty damning claims about Binance that haven't yet been addressed, that didn't come up in the Department of Justice investigation, but that could still lead to trouble for the platform. So time will tell how that suit plays out. It is a civil suit, so it won't lead to any criminal charges against CZ or Binance, but nonetheless an important thing to follow if you operate in the space. So that's a video. Not sure what the constructive takeaways are here, but I will highlight, as I've done in past videos. Obviously, I don't personally invest in cryptocurrencies, as I've highlighted in the past. If you decide to do so, that's entirely up to you, but you do have to be aware of the risks that you face in doing so. The space remains a regulatory wasteland, and with companies like Binance not even meeting the bare minimum in terms of, money transmitter requirements, there's a lot of risk that something else comes to the surface about how they're managing customer funds. And with it being such a new area with no guardrails in place, you have to be very careful with the companies you put your trust into. Yes, users can still be scammed in the traditional finance space, but there are a lot more backstops in the form of insurance corporations and other protections that just don't yet exist for any cryptocurrency companies. As we saw with FTX, it doesn't take long for things to completely unravel. And a tweet about how safe funds are on the platform isn't really any guarantee that your money's actually there. Anyway, I guess I'll end on that note. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please do make sure to like, subscribe, all that good stuff. It does help the channel tremendously. And let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, whether you're someone who supports CZ and Binance, whether you hate CZ and Binance and cryptocurrency as a whole. Happy to hear your thoughts regardless. Thanks again for joining, and as always, be safe out there.